In the war-torn country of Ukraine, a member of the parliament is under investigation for allegedly faking sick leave to go on a luxury trip with his family. Let's hear more from Mariya Yunkina.
Ukrainian authorities conducted a search at the home of Yuri Aristov, a member of the parliament, for allegedly violating wartime restrictions by going on a holiday abroad due to the personal reasons. Ukrainian investigators said they found evidence suggested that Aristov traveled to Lithuania for a work-related trip. However, Aristov allegedly faked sick leave to go on a family vacation in a luxury hotel located in Maldives. If found guilty, Aristov could be imprisoned for up to 3 years. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the issue and ordered all members of the parliament and officials to stay in Ukraine.
Ніхто не пробачить ані депутатам, ані суддям, ані воєнкомам чи будь-яким іншим посадовцям протиставлення себе державі. Комусь там острови та курорти під час війни, комусь там заробіток у воєнкоматі, комусь хабарі в судах для будь-яких державних посадовців – це зрада державних принципів, це зрада інтересів суспільства. А ті, хто думає, як би побільше часу провести за кордоном та шукають собі вигідні відрядження, щоб можна було їх поєднати з бізнесом, з друзями чи пляжами, у вас таких не буде.
З вами була Mariya Yunkina, SMNI News.
The second day of the Russia-Africa summit kicked off on Friday, wherein Russian President Vladimir Putin lauded the growing political and economic power of Africa. Let's find out what else happened during the summit with Carlo De Peña's report.
The era of hegemony of one or several states is fading into the past. This is what Russian President Vladimir Putin told African leaders who attended the second day of the Russian-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg on Friday. Putin believes that Africa's political and economic power is growing, and at the same time, the ex-dominant world powers are losing their influence. The Russian president said, and quote, "Before our eyes, the African continent is becoming a new center of power. Its political and economic role is growing exponentially, and everyone will have to reckon with this objective reality." End of quote. He stressed that while the era of hegemony of one or several states is fading despite resistance from those seeking to maintain a monopoly on world affairs, Putin also promised that Russia will continue to expand its interaction with African countries, saying that it is a natural process. During the event, the Russian president also mentioned that his country boosted food supplies to African countries despite sanctions and promised Moscow will be a responsible supplier of agricultural produces, including free of charge to countries in need.
We expand and extend the shipments of agricultural products to Africa. In the year 2022, we have sent 11.5 million tons of grains to African countries, and in the first 6 months of this year, we have sent another almost 10 million tons. Despite the illegal sanctions against our exports, which seriously hinder the shipments of Russian food products and complicate the transportation logistics, insurance and bank transactions. Let me underline that you, my dear friends, can rest assured that Russia shall always remain a responsible international supplier of agricultural products. We shall continue supporting the countries and regions in need. We will provide our grains and other food products, including shipments free of charge, and shipments within the United Nations World Food Programme.
Many African countries rely heavily on Russia and Ukraine for their grain imports. In fact, UN data shows that between 90 to 100% of the wheat Somalia and Eritrea needs comes from the two countries, while 15 other African countries imported over 50% of their wheat products from Russia or Ukraine. Thus, the termination of the Black Sea grain deal sent shockwaves to the world, with many African countries reeling from the impact. But according to Putin, Russia has repeatedly extended the deal in good faith, despite the other parties failing to fulfill the full agreement, and that tons of fertilizer exports failed to fully reach African nations, as majority remains in Europe. To recall, Putin offered to provide free grain to 6 African countries, and that the shipments will be ready within months. Each will receive 25,000 to 50,000 tons of grain, and Russia will cover all delivery costs of its shipments.
In the near months, 3-4 months, we would be ready to provide to Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Eritrea, who would be ready to supply 50,000 tons of grain to each. Will ensure free shipping of this cargo.
And on Friday, he announced that Russia will allocate an additional $90 million to African countries for development and promised trade preferences. He also revealed Russia has written off debt amounting to $23 billion. The Russia-Africa Summit and Forum was first held in Russia's Sochi in 2019, with representatives of all 54 countries of the continent, including 43 African heads of state, as well as 8 major African integrations and organizations. But this year, only 40 African countries attended, 17 of which were represented by their heads of state. The Kremlin said the low turnout of African heads of state was due to Western pressure. Reporting, this has been Carlo de la Peña, SMNI News.
Meanwhile, the chief of the Wagner paramilitary group was spotted on the sidelines of the Russia-Africa Summit on Thursday and was photographed with an African dignitary. Jane Kudnita has the details.
Yevgeny Prigozhin, the founder and chief of Wagner, was spotted on the sidelines of the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg on Thursday, the first sighting inside the country since leading a short-lived mutiny against the Russian military in June. Prigozhin was photographed smiling, shaking hands with an African dignitary who was part of the Central African Republic delegation, as said by accounts associated with Wagner. The African dignitary was said to be a senior aide to the Central African Republic President, Faustin Archange Touadera, who is also backed by Wagner fighters. Reports say the meeting took place at Rezini Palace Hotel, which is owned by Prigozhin himself. The exact date of the images is unknown. However, it was recently posted on a Facebook account of Dmitry Siti, a senior Wagner figure in the Central African Republic, who has been sanctioned by Western countries due to his ties with Yevgeny Prigozhin. Reporting, this has been Jane Kudnita, SMNI News.